Have you ever driven past a prison and thought, I wonder what happens behind closed doors? Our correctional system in America needs to be reformed for the greater good of the country. A recent report shows that the current strategies used by our justice system to achieve rehabilitation and increase public safety have been ineffective, with more than 80% of those leaving our state prisons being rearrested again in the future. I'll explain the main reasons we should reform the correction system. Now that I have gotten your attention, let's start by talking about what's going on behind closed doors. Since about 40% of state inmates and 27% of federal inmates have not completed high school, prison education programs allow inmates to gain the necessary skills they will need to find work outside of prison. The Bureau of Prisons is working to overhaul its policies on the treatment and care of inmates with mental illness. In May 2014, BOP issued new internal guidance prioritizing the use of cognitive behavioral therapy. Since 2014, BOP has established a number of secure mental health step-down units, which provide housing and treatment for inmates with serious mental illness and a significant history of violence. In addition to educational opportunities, job training programs in prison reduce the reoffending rate and prove to be cost-effective. Prisoners who participate in work release programs are 16% less likely to be rearrested, and 70% less likely to be sent back to prison. Now that you know what happens in the prison facilities, let's move on to what should change in the correction system. In 2016, more than 62,250 people were sentenced in the federal courts. Nearly 14,000 of them were sentenced based on the statute requiring a mandatory minimum term of imprisonment. Elimination of mandatory minimum sentences, mandatory consecutive sentences, and the crack powder cocaine disparity would greatly improve fairness in federal sentencing for large numbers of defendants, but all those reforms require congressional action. Structural sentencing reform proposals attack laws or policies that reduce or eliminate the exercise of discretion by criminal justice decision makers. Mandatory minimum sentencing law restrict judges' discretion and reflection of Congress' lack of confidence that judges will impose appropriate punishment on. Now that we know what we should change, let's talk about why we should reform the correction system. Prison reform is focused on ensuring public safety and restoration for those impacted by crime through the creation of a constructive culture within our prison system. These reforms seek to alter the circumstances of incarceration in ways that allow the system to model and incentivize the attitudes, behaviors, and lifestyles conducive to personal responsibility and self-control. Achieving these goals through prison reform usually falls within two broad categories. First, ensuring access to programs which help individuals gain knowledge, skills, job training, and positive values during their period of incarceration. Second, by revising correctional policies to ensure that minimum barriers exist to maintaining positive community relationship during the period of incarceration. Prison reform seeks to change the status quo by providing individuals with a constructive and dignified experience while they are incarcerated and providing access to tools to transform their lives. In theory, the fact that so many defendants plead guilty and seemingly accept responsibility for the crimes they have committed is desirable. Now that we know why we should reform it, let's discuss why we shouldn't reform the correction system. Without sentencing reform, the limits of sentences for those eligible for prison programming will increase due to secession prosecutorial policies. Congress should craft prison reform legislation that is appropriate for these national circumstances, but that also goes beyond job training and education. Without drastic changes to federal sentencing laws, even these more expansive reforms to the BOP would not address the fundamental injustices. About 4.5 million people in the United States are on probation and parole supervision, double the number of people locked up. A new report by the Council of State Government Justice Center shows that 45% of state prison admissions nationwide are the result of violations of probation or parole, either for new crimes or technical violations. Even more alarming is the number of people who are being sent back to prison as a result of technical violations, which are typically minor infractions such as failed drug tests or missed curfews. With that being said, I have explained what goes on behind closed doors and why we should reform the correction system. Hopefully we can all agree it needs to change. And overall, I think we're wondering what really went on behind closed doors. Now you know.